Bonnie, I believe you're muted if you were going to introduce yourself and say hello to everyone.
I don't think I'm muted. Can you hear me?
Yep, now I can hear you. All right, Bonnie, take it away.
Fantastic. Hi, hello everyone. I am Bonnie Kistler with the Gardens at Town Square. We're one of Era Living's 8 premier retirement communities. And before we start today, I thought I would mention a little bit about Era Living's memory program. Era Living Care is offered in our terrace neighborhoods at Ida Culver House Broadview and the Gardens at Town Square. Both communities utilize the best friends approach to providing care, which is based in the notion that what a person really needs is a best friend, someone who empathizes with their situation, remains loving and positive, and is dedicated to helping the person feel safe, secure, and valued. Currently, we do have limited availability in our terrace neighborhoods at both the Gardens at Town Square in Bellevue and at Ida Culver House Broadview. If you would like to schedule a tour, please do reach out at 425-688-1900. To learn more about our Era Living communities or the Era Living Memory Care Program, I also encourage you to visit our website, which is www.eraliving.com. And now, our main event, we are honored to host David Troxel, who will be presenting on creating a plan for successful support for a loved one with dementia. David Troxel has become internationally known for his writing and teaching in the fields of Alzheimer's disease and long-term care. He has co-authored with Virginia Bell 6 influential books and articles relating to dementia care, including his book, The Best Friends Approach to Dementia Care.
Thank you, everybody.
David, may take some time. Yes.
Oh,
please go ahead.
Oh, were you done, Bonnie, or did you want to say anything else?
Please go ahead.
All right. Well, welcome, everybody. It's great to be with you. I see some familiar names and faces from our seminar series or our webinar series. And I want to thank my friends at Era Living and Tina and the gang for being so welcoming and continuing this strong message campaign and marketing, education, training, support for staff and families. This is a time where I think we've all come through some rough times. Hopefully we're doing a bit better. And it's a perfect time to really learn more about Alzheimer's disease and dementia and caregiving. And I just want to again thank Era Living for its real commitment to public education. So we really appreciate that very much. Again, I'm David Troxel. I live in Sacramento, California, and I'm delighted to be with you today. And I'll pull up my PowerPoint and we can get the show underway here. Let's see, here we go. Okay. So can you all see the screen okay? Thank you very much. Well, again, as part of this ambitious series we've been doing for a year and a half or so now, we've covered a lot of different topics. And I wanted to talk now about, where you should stand if you're a family member, someone who's beginning this journey of dementia care, or maybe you've been very well involved. And so today's talk, we're discussing creating a supportive plan for family members living with dementia. And again, delighted to be with you today. Again, I'm David Troxel, author of several books on dementia care. Probably of note is that in addition to my work professionally, I've also been a family member for my mother, Dorothy, who passed away in 2008 with Alzheimer's disease. And I'm proud to certainly be an educational partner for Era Living. Today, today we have a number of things we'll be discussing. We'll be talking about just some general thoughts and reflections and ideas I have for you who are family members who are starting this journey or well underway with your journey of caregiving. We'll talk about services and programs for people living with dementia and families. I'll just talk briefly about legal and financial planning because this is certainly an area that I still see an enormous need for people to be on top of. Decision making and how, in kind of the spirit of the Era Living Best Friends philosophy of dementia care, how you can work with your family when it comes to decisions to avoid being the bad guy, because sometimes I think even the best caregivers become the bad guy when you're trying to encourage a person to do certain things and to maybe take steps like having an in-home caregiver, using a day center, or even considering assisted living. Again, welcome. I think a few of you just joined in. We just are starting out again with our kind of overview of today's game plan for this workshop on caregiving and dementia. So I think the first thing I'd like to share with you is something that my mother's neurologist, Dr. Bob Harbaugh in Santa Barbara, said to my father and to me when my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. He said, "Welcome to the caregiving club." It doesn't necessarily seem like a club most of us would like to be involved with, but unfortunately, when we think about the demographics of the country and all the studies that are out there from the Alzheimer's Association, for example, it turns out that 1 in 3 United States families are caregivers for someone with Alzheimer's disease or other dementia, or at least involved in some capacity in caring. So I guess my first message to you is that you are not alone. Even on my own sort of city block here in Sacramento, maybe the 20 or so houses on my block, I could think of maybe 7 or 8 houses where I've met neighbors and talked to people who are concerned about a family member. So this is an enormous public health challenge, and something that I think, if we can take any consolation on, is that we aren't alone, that we have resources out there, friends and family who hopefully can be very helpful. I'm very moved by Rosalind Carter's words. Rosalind, after she left the White House, really devoted herself to aging issues and caregiving issues. And Rosalind Carter, our former First Lady, said, "There are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers." So this is an issue that touches us all, whether it be Alzheimer's or some other disorder. So right off the bat, I want to encourage those of you, again, who may be new to this or maybe well on your way, to be honest about your family member's diagnosis with friends and family members. Certainly there are families who obviously want to, protect someone's privacy and, kind of not necessarily air in public their medical situation. But, the thing about holding this in as a secret is I think there are 2 negatives. I think number one, and I'll just be very frank in saying this, people will notice. It's hard to hold a secret of dementia, because if the person is still in society, still talking with people on a phone or Zoom or in person, I think friends and family will notice that there's something going on if they repeat themselves or say the same stories. And second, I think if you kind of give into your fears and the stigma, which is still out there, of course, but if you give into it, I think it becomes very hard to talk about the disease with your family member, very hard to plan, very hard to use services. So again, I think just be open and honest. You can kind of even give yourself a script. I remember Mrs. Reagan, Nancy Reagan, President Reagan's wife, of course, she did not really want to spend a lot of time talking to people about the president's health, or, really was very protective of his privacy. And I noticed that in media interview after media interview after media interview, when they asked Mrs. Reagan, "How is your husband doing?" she would say, "He's doing as well as can be expected. He's doing as well as can be expected." And I thought in a way that was a very good posture for her, to not feel like she has to go into great detail about it, but could at least give an answer which does make some sense. Second, in terms of recommendations and reflections, learn all you can, but also to be an educator for your family or your friends. I mean, many caregivers I know struggle because you might have a sister-in-law who says, "Oh, I think you're exaggerating, nothing's wrong with Bob," or maybe even one of your adult children is just not quite where they want to be. So if you can get a brochure or a link offline, send it to your friends and family, invite them to come to these webinars or to join a webinar virtually. If you see that the Alzheimer's Association or one of the societies near you is having a conference, invite your family to come. So do all you can to educate your network. It does really help. And of course, local support groups can be very valuable, and they're even online now. Maybe one of my friends from Era Living in a few minutes can tell us whether you all have kicked off your support groups again. I know Era Living before the pandemic was certainly actively doing support groups in their building, but this is something, again, valuable. I find that in a support group setting, people can say to each other things that as a professional I might not be able to say. I can't really confront a family and say you're making a mistake, or recommend one doctor over another. But in a support group, they're pretty freewheeling. Take things with a grain of salt, of course, but I do think that that honest kind of direct feedback, family member to family member, can be quite valuable. Again, just a few more just sort of general reflections here. As you're thinking about your kind of your hardiness for carrying this journey of caregiving, I think it's not bad to take a yellow pad out and kind of list your family and caregiving resources. Do you have friends, close friends or family nearby who can help? Do you have friends nearby, again, who will help, friends and family? What is your own health status? I mean, are you in good shape, or are you yourself facing different struggles and health struggles? Sometimes we see in our world today, we might have a 90-year-old wife caring for her 95-year-old husband with dementia. It isn't always clear that the person who's going to be the primary caregiver has the stamina to get through this, not to mention even the emotional hardiness. And of course, again, your self-assessment and your ability and willingness to be a caregiver. I have been in support groups where I've had someone say, I love my husband, but I am not really cut out to be a caregiver. It's just not my nature, my personality. I'm type A, I'm a perfectionist. It's hard for me to kind of think how I can manage this. And I think that's actually wonderful if you can say to yourself that this isn't really something that is right for me, because that opens the door for you to get help from services, from friends and families, etc. I like this Ralph Waldo Emerson quote: "What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us." So again, this idea of your ability to kind of pull from within to be an effective caregiver. A couple more things here. Certainly, this is an area I was reflecting with a friend recently that has greatly improved. Years ago, it was hard to get a good medical evaluation, but now, many family docs are still, very capable of understanding what needs to be done when it comes to memory loss workups, getting blood work, getting an EKG, getting scans, doing a neuropsychological test where the neuropsychologist will ask a bunch of questions and really assess someone's memory. But in general, I have to say I do still prefer going to a specialist, going to a neurologist, maybe going to a geriatrician or a geropsychiatrist, get a good workup and evaluation. Nowadays, they can say what type of dementia somebody has. So if your doctor just says mother has dementia, as we've discussed in some previous webinars, that isn't very specific. We want to know what kind of dementia someone has, because these dementias have different presentations, different treatment strategies, and it's good to know whether mom has, Lewy body dementia or a vascular dementia, or some other kind of dementia, or aphasia, something where we can kind of have you understand what is really happening. I do recommend, for a first opinion or a second opinion, a university memory disorder clinic. And as far as I still recall, being in California, but I know the University of Washington is a major research center, and I believe they do have a memory disorder clinic. Again, you may say, well, what's the point? But I do like you to go back to your neurologist once a year for a follow-up. The doctor can at least see what's happening, and if he or she has seen the patient recently, they're a better resource if you have questions. And then this last bullet point: evaluate medications with your doctor or pharmacist to minimize pills taken. I'll just go off the sharing for a moment and just share with you, this issue of medications. Again, we've covered a little bit of this in past webinars, but the number one cause of death for people with dementia is aspiration pneumonia. That kind of breakdown of the brain and body, the swallowing, that aspiration pneumonia that can trigger a lot of bad things. So one thing in general, even without that piece of information, sometimes people with dementia don't want to take their pills. If they're living by themselves, of course, that creates a whole host of problems about medication management. But to me, if someone has a progressive illness that's not going to get better, Alzheimer's disease, I want to kind of, really evaluate their meds and have them be on as little as possible. Obviously things that are really important, like insulin, we want to stick with. But, does someone with advancing dementia need to be on baby aspirin to prevent heart attack? I used to be on the national ethics panel of the U.S. Alzheimer's Association. There's no religion in the world that I'm aware of that demands we treat everything. And all meds have side effects, including aspirin that can cause nausea. So again, talk to your pharmacist, talk to your doctor, and try to get those winnowed down the best you can to, to me, 10 or less is ideal. I'll pause for a moment. Are there any questions so far before we get into a little bit more kind of practical caregiving tips and planning tips? Feel free to go off mute. You can hold your space bar down and speak, or put something in the chat room.
Doesn't look like we have any questions yet.
Okay, I will move on. Thank you very much. Again, thank you for your participation here. Okay. All right. Again, evaluate those medications. Okay. A few more thoughts about just some general topics to consider related to, really being an effective caregiver and a strategic caregiver. Evaluate your physical environment. Is your apartment or home set up to provide care? Do you have a lot of steps and concerns about falls? Is there good lighting? Are you able to reduce the clutter? One thing I would like to recommend to you is that people with dementia, they can get confused by lights and shapes. This can trigger some hallucination. So do your best to have the space be well lit and clutter free. Are there accessible bathrooms? Do you have a safe neighborhood? If someone were to wander off or leave or exit seek, will they be okay in the short run? Hopefully we can get them back into the house very quickly. Again, things like this are very, very important. So I will say that the Alzheimer's Association does have a home safety checklist, which can be quite valuable. I think if you just Google, I don't know if you could pick up that link very easily from my slides, but basically if you just Google Alzheimer's Association home safety checklist, you can get some good ideas there. Fall prevention. Here's another good resource. The CDC has a great booklet about fall prevention, but sadly, falls, as I'm sure many of you know, truly can be very debilitating for elders. There's some research out there that an older person breaking their hip, it might lower their longevity, the average longevity of life, to something like 18 months. And people with Alzheimer's disease or other dementias, what's happening is these visual spatial issues are contributing to a higher risk or higher rate of falls. So in other words, if you see someone with dementia, often they'll pick up a fork if they're eating, and they'll actually maybe miss their mouth. So this kind of spatial disconnect, SPATIAL, spatial disconnect, can be a problem. So I want you to evaluate your home for fall risks for them and for yourselves. Get those grab bars in, make sure that the home is as safe as possible. Sorry for my bad quality slide here, but one book I'd recommend to you, I believe it's still in print. If not, you could probably find used copies on Amazon or eBay. But Mark Warner wrote an excellent book called Alzheimer's Proofing Your Home that is actually really voluminous in its recommendations. A couple of things I remember from reading the book that were valuable is water temperature. A person with dementia, most often, if the water's hot, they'll move their hand away, but not always. And you might have someone who draws a really hot bath and gets in it and doesn't have the wherewithal to get out. So I want you to be careful to, look up a safe water temperature for someone who's older, that, again, they won't be scalded if they accidentally have the hot water on. So I think that was one really good tip I had. And then in terms of just exit seeking, probably the scariest thing, particularly being in the Northwest where you have inclement weather, is, someone might get up at midnight and think they're late for work and just simply walk out of the house. So do your best to, with, either how you kind of lock the doors or having bells or alarms or some kind of alarm system, do your best to, have some kind of way of monitoring that. The Alzheimer's Association also has a safe return medic alert program where you can actually order a bracelet, some labels to put in their clothes, and actually send a photograph ahead into the system ahead of time, so that if a person does get away from you, which happens every day, if the person gets away from you, you can, with one phone call or email message, alert this program, and they can actually wire or electronically send this photograph of the person who's missing to all the first responders in your area. One tip I have for my friends at Era Living, and even for any of you who work in other assisted living or senior programs, I have sometimes asked families to enroll people in this Medic Alert Safe Return program, even if they're living in assisted living, because they're not, as you know, locked units. They're secure neighborhoods. And so it is certainly possible, even in the very best programs, that someone can get away from people. Maybe a family member comes in, doesn't realize someone's a resident, and just allows them to leave. Now, again, I know Era Living and many programs do a lot to prevent this, but we can't prevent them 100% of the time. So if you have someone who's particularly clever and an escape artist, as I've had occasionally in my career, the Safe Return program can be helpful. Okay, so I want to sort of now transition away from just sort of these initial remarks and talk a bit about the continuum of care, because today's talk, again, is sort of on services and programs, this continuum of care. And I apologize, I haven't quite finished it up yet, but I'm doing a one-pager with some notes from this talk. I'll have it to Era Living later today, and they can email it out to everybody tomorrow. But I didn't quite get it done. I'm always updating things up to the last minute. So we'll talk about this in my handout that will come to you. Continuum of care, what is that? Well, what this suggests is, it's maybe a bit jargony, but basically, when we think about services for people with dementia and families, there is sort of a step-by-step process where each step involves more care, greater care, and more help for families. So I kind of maybe a bit unconventionally started off with where many of us are even today, this one-on-one family, friend, and support. People, maybe someone with mild cognitive impairment living by themselves, somebody with dementia living with one caregiver or a family member. Certainly these people are kind of our starting point. The next step up for me is a really good adult day center. Now, sadly, they're kind of hard to find, and some of them around the country may or may not offer transportation, may or may not have great hours. I was talking to one program recently, and they're open Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 10 to 2. And that's great for a bit of respite or a break, but it doesn't really help a working caregiver. But nevertheless, the day centers can be quite valuable, and they tend to be activity rich. In-home help, obviously, many of you probably use that. We even have sometimes one-on-one paid caregivers in assisted living. But in-home help is certainly a good option for a lot of people. I'll talk about this a bit later, but there are some downsides. Can you find the right match, the right person in today's staffing world? Can you get consistent scheduling? But I have found some success stories there, no doubt. What I want to recommend to you, I'll reinforce this a bit later in the talk, but if you do have an in-home worker, again, make sure that they are engaging the person, doing things together. Write them out a menu of things you want them to do. Don't let them just be there all day and do nothing. Assisted living, of course, as provided by Era Living. This is a surprising number of people with assisted living may have some mild cognitive impairment, and that's why many assisted living places have the next level on this continuum, memory care. But most companies doing assisted living and memory care are dementia capable. Again, we'll talk more about this in a minute, but you want to find one that has a really defined memory care program. But I will say that my own mother lived in assisted living memory care for 3 years before she passed away on hospice in the neighborhood, in the building. And I think it's surprising maybe how well assisted living can work for people with dementia, because that socialization, that sort of social milieu or environment can really be very therapeutic. A good assisted living program, a good memory care program, they're activity rich, they have a lot going on, there's sort of a neighborliness, a friendship that I think, again, kind of helps people feel safe in sort of this calm way in this normal storm of dementia. And of course, finally, skilled nursing. Skilled nursing, probably 50% of people in skilled nursing centers around the country have dementia. It tends to be a place where you see a lot of older people, a lot of people who are really struggling with their health. This is where you often have 24-hour nursing, lots of medical needs, medical care, but certainly dementia care does happen there. A lot of times around the country, which I think is a huge, huge plus, our laws have changed, our regulations have changed, where someone can go to assisted living or go to memory care and often sort of age in place and stay in that area, because again, they tend to be much more pleasant and more activity rich and positive than going to skilled nursing. Again, if you need skilled nursing, you need skilled nursing, but you want to find a place that has relationships with hospice and other groups who can really hold on to mom and dad throughout the course of their illness, if possible, at kind of the highest level or best level of the continuum of services. So again, we'll jump into kind of, if you have a day center you're looking for, if you're looking at a home health agency, if you're looking at an assisted living company, what I want you to be asking is to be a sophisticated consumer and ask the salespeople, does your organization have a defined and well-articulated philosophy related to dementia care? Okay. Now, again, a lot of people say things on their website, but when you talk to the team members, do they talk about something like the best friends philosophy that I'm known for, or a philosophy that's life affirming, that's positive, that really shows they've given some thought? So it's kind of surprising that a lot of companies out there really don't have a defined program. And I'd like you to find one that has a certain sophistication around memory care. In today's staffing world, we all have struggles. Nothing's going to be 100% right now with staff shortages, but these healthier, better organizations really are still navigating the pandemic, navigating the staffing crisis, and still giving that loving care and dementia care. How do they train their staff? What's the staff training about? Ask that question. I know in the past when I've been up in Seattle visiting Era Living, I often talk to a lot of staff. I know there's a commitment to education and training, but find out if the staff are getting the tools they need to succeed. And again, do they have this socialization emphasis on engagement? How are their activity calendars, or do they have some fun, engaging activities happening? And this is all something we're looking for. I know I'm an idealist, but there are good organizations out there doing this good work. Okay. A few other resources you begin to sort of think about what now and what do I need as you think about this continuum of care. I will recommend there's I guess a fairly recent trend, maybe the last 25 years, where we have now something called geriatric care managers, often nurses or social workers. And these are people who have some expertise in aging and dementia. They have some expertise about community services and knowing kind of what's out there. And you can hire them on an hourly basis, and they'll come in and evaluate the home setting, evaluate the person, and give you some written or verbal recommendations about what you need. And often, if you need to put together some services, they can help you do that. Many of them can even help do things like pay bills, or to help, organize finances, or look for benefits for you and your family. So highly recommend it. Alzheimer's Association, of course, about half my career was with the Alzheimer's Association. Great organization. Again, they have a toll-free 800 number, 24 hours. You can Google that and see that. Lots of good things. And I know the Era Living, people, from the marketing people to the program people, if they can't help you right away with assisted living, please feel free to call them. I know Tina and I have talked about this, and others within the company. They're always happy to do some sleuthing for you, look for some programs, give you some referrals, let you know their experiences. Perhaps Era Living has a relationship with a local day center, or can even tell you some of the providers they've worked with in the community who've been very helpful. So don't hesitate to ask them for support or to help. So again, in this sort of kind of caregiver toolkit talk today about some things for you, just a couple of resources here. This is a book I'm very fond of, written by two friends and colleagues of mine, Lori White and Beth Spencer. Again, apologies for that kind of crummy photo there. It's called Moving a Relative and Other Transitions in Dementia Care. An excellent book if you're struggling or trying to think about if mom should move into assisted living or another setting, or if you get in-home help. The book is full of lots of good advice and ideas. Can even help you if you're thinking about, is mom best for independent living, assisted living, or memory care? What's the right level of care? I think the book's pretty widely available on Amazon for like $22 or something like that. And I think Era Living might have a couple of these copies in their library as well, if you want to borrow one from them. So again, just a few do's and don'ts. In-home care certainly is an enormous industry these days. Lots of good people in that field. If you are trying to find someone to be with your family member, look for a caregiver who will do things with your family member, not just someone who will complete tasks or sit in front of the TV all day. Now, again, this is something where I think we have to do some work. I'll go off, stop sharing for a moment here. I want to say that even after you place someone in memory care assisted living, your work is not done. It's important for you to communicate with the family, with the building, communicate with an in-home worker, Here are some things my mother enjoys and likes. Here are some of her hobbies, interests. If you have an in-home worker, absolutely take out a yellow pad and say, hey, I'd like you to exercise with mom from 11 to 12. I'd like you to listen to music from 1 to 2. Let's watch the old Lawrence Welk DVD on 3 to 4. Play with the dog. I mean, write out a schedule for them. Write out a schedule for them, because I do think that, again, if you don't do that, there may be not the activity you expect, particularly with in-home care. Again, for assisted living, my own mother, some of you have heard this story a few times for the last 2 years. I've been speaking for Era Living. My mother was Canadian. She loved Earl Grey tea with milk. And I was sure to keep those Earl Grey tea bags in her room. My mother and I had a little tea party for the staff at her assisted living building to actually pour tea and have cookies so they could all know what Earl Grey tea was. And so by doing that, the staff were really terrific about if my mom was having some anxiety or stress, they would say, Dorothy, oh my goodness, you're worried about your son, David. You haven't seen him for weeks. Well, maybe I was there that morning. She forgot. How about I pour you a lovely cup of Earl Grey tea with milk, just the way you like it? And again, that kind of connection that my father and I made sure that the staff understood and knew truly paid dividends, because my mother, when she had her favorite Earl Grey tea with milk, felt like she knew them, they knew her, and it built a lot of nice connections. So again, we want to kind of give the staff tools to succeed the best we can. Okay. All right, for day centers, again, just covering a few of these continuum of care elements. Look for a convenient schedule. Is transportation provided? Is the program activity rich, which is nice because I think a lot of adult day centers are activity rich. And is it a social model or a health model? Now, again, forgive me, I don't know if these are the exact terms used in Washington State, but in California, in many places, we have these sort of healthcare models where they often have the nurse there the whole time. Some of them will take Medicaid, where really they're designed to give a lot of healthcare services for people with dementia or for frail elders, hopefully to keep them out of nursing homes eventually. But there's also this sort of hybrid or tradition of these social model programs, which is where I spent some time in my career, where they don't necessarily have a nurse on board, but they're still very much involved with taking care of someone, giving them some nice food during the day, activities, engagement. Sometimes some of them will have programs where they can offer a shower or do some personal care. But this is for people who need that socialization and structure. And it also, of course, gives the family members that desperately needed break or respite care from their work. So again, you can assess which kind of day center you might need. Okay. Now, again, as we think about assisted living and memory care, I did a little bit of research just trying to look up some of the data, and maybe my friends at Era Living can check me on this, but it is interesting that approximately 1 in 5 families who are caregivers of people with dementia will ultimately utilize residential care services for the person with dementia. So again, many people age in place at home, but still 1 in 5, which is a pretty considerable number, will eventually need memory care. So if you're thinking that this might be an option, and honestly, even if you have ruled it out, I want you to still consider visiting communities, visiting Era Living, visiting communities, and trying to kind of make a game plan, because you do not want to have to make a placement or a decision in a crisis or have an urgent move. You want to be able to kind of find a place that you think will be very suitable for your mom and dad or husband, wife, or partner. You want to be able to find a place that's nearby. And sometimes that isn't that easy. So if you can do some of this research now, make a game plan, again, look for that staff with a caring spirit, good training, and an environment that's welcoming and activity rich. What I like about this is you can then kind of have your plan. You can maybe even do some paperwork ahead of time. So if there is an emergency, maybe the caregiver gets sick, maybe you're the caregiver and you fall and break your ankle, or you've got to go to the hospital, at least now you have some paperwork, you've got some interest going, and you might be able to find a place that can take your family member even on a respite stay for a few weeks or a month while you're getting well, or a place to make that placement when needed. Okay. Probably a little bit out of order here. I should have maybe put this up a little bit earlier, but do be sure that your legal and financial affairs are in order. Now, the huge majority of people I meet, it's all taken care of. But a lot of people, believe it or not, even some attorneys I've met, still have not done their wills or kept them up to date. The problem here is that if you, for example, are married and your spouse has dementia, eventually they are not going to be able to manage the affairs. Eventually, they're not going to be able to pay bills or make good decisions. And so you want to make sure that you have this durable power of attorney for them. Even though they're your spouse, you want to make sure you have that, their advanced directives, their powers of attorney for healthcare, very, very important. And of course, God forbid something happens to you as a caregiver, and suddenly the husband with dementia is trying to pay bills or make decisions. You want to be sure in that case that there's a trusted second or third person who can take over, hopefully a family member or someone that you trust to really manage your affairs. So again, be aware of this. And of course, certainly the advanced directives for all of us are very important as well. I'm just going to peek in the chat room. Here we go. Thank you. I'm looking to see here if I have a few questions here. Okay, I'll just pause for a moment and see the questions here. What about supplements? My mom takes about 13 supplements. Wow. Peggy, if I pronounced your name right, I'm not a physician, so I got to be a little bit careful here, but I will say that, you know, I'm not a huge fan of these over-the-counter supplements that are often expensive. They're not really checked by the federal government to know kind of what's in them. So to me, I'd rather someone get their vitamins, minerals from, you know, from healthy fruits and vegetables and natural foods. Maybe take one multiple supplement. Again, some of these pills you see advertised on television that boost the brain. I can't say they don't work, but there's not necessarily research out there that's reputable that they do work. So again, be cautious, talk to your doctor. But I think I'd rather see you just take one multivitamin and get your antioxidants from fresh fruit, blueberries, green leafy vegetables, all of that. The Mediterranean diet, very good for the brain. David, sorry, I found the chat. Would high blood pressure meds be worth treating? In general, yes. Again, I'm not a physician, so you want to talk to your pharmacist and doctor. But I would say that, you know, you want to obviously avoid stroke for people with dementia. So you want to monitor blood pressure, things like blood pressure, insulin, you know, all of those things, pain you want to manage. I think the antidepressants are also actually pretty good with older people because depression is really an enemy of the brain. There's research from the Alzheimer's Association, David, that about 40% of people with dementia experience depression during some point of their illness. So that would be one as well. So definitely talk to your pharmacist or doctor about that. David says, do 20% age in place at home or 80%? 80%. So 80% for whatever reason, stay home. About 1 in 5 will eventually go to residential care. Good questions. Thank you. Okay. Decision making. All right. So this is kind of where the rubber meets the road, because I have to tell you that I hear from families all the time where there's great conflict about, you know, kind of what to do with mom, how to make things work, how to talk to the person about the dementia. There's not necessarily one way to do it, but in general, I would say involve the person as much as possible. So I like to certainly at least try to express concerns, you know, Mom, here's what's happening. The family's concerned. We really think that, you know, there's a beautiful place around the corner where you can be safe and have lots of good things and great food, and let's try it out. And even to some extent, Mom, the doctor says you have some medical issues. You've got some memory issues. The doctor doesn't really want you to be at home anymore. Let's talk about it. So you try your best to kind of put it out there. Now, of course, most of us want to stay home. Most of us don't want to move out. This is where you have to remember that because of their dementia, the person's judgment is influenced and affected negatively, and their abilities to problem solve are also impaired. So you want to, you know, be aware that if you just say, I'll do whatever mom and dad want, well, they may not be making good decisions. So again, we want to try to be protective of them as well. Now, in decision making, there's something I've spoken about on a previous webinar that I do think is important to bring up now and then, this concept of substituted judgment. It's hard sometimes. Maybe you promised dad he could stay at home forever, but now you discover dad's being cheated or bamboozled by the fake Canadian lottery letters. He's running around town disheveled. He's driving unsafely. He's not taking his meds. The house that he took such pride in is falling apart. even though you may have promised dad he could stay at the home forever, you could say to yourself, substituted judgment, again, this concept from ethics. What do I think my father would have wanted me to do if I could talk to him about this 20 years ago? If I said, Dad, I know you want to stay home, but what if A, B, C, D, E, F? What if I discovered you'd written $20,000 in checks to fake charities or fake IRS calls? Would you still want me to do nothing? Would you still want me to do nothing and leave you be? Or would you want me to act? And often doing this sort of exercise, I think, helps particularly the adult children understand that actually our parents would most likely want us to make these decisions for them. So that can be very, very helpful. So I'll mention just a little simple case study here from some friends of mine that I did a bit of work with as well. Grandmother was a San Francisco, kind of high society lady. Her son sadly had died, and so it was really her two grandchildren who were involved in kind of keeping up with her. She was living at home with paid help. That's what she wanted. The house had lots of steps and fall risk, problems with scheduling the team members. They had 24-hour care, but what if someone didn't show up? What if someone didn't make it? The family would have to run over, do the midnight shift. The grandmother still had some of her finances under her control, and they discovered she was lending money to the caregivers, and there was a lot of potential abuse going on there. This normally sort of social person is becoming more and more isolated. How do we get grandmother to agree to a move into assisted living? Now, I'm going to just pause here and see if anyone's brave enough to weigh in. Do you have any ideas? What would you say to the grandmother or the family when it's clear that she's in a pretty untenable situation? She doesn't want to move, but all these bad things are happening. Does anyone have an idea about how they might handle it? I'd welcome any conversations or ideas. Don't be too shy here. You can go in the chat room, or you can go off mute. Perhaps it's even, okay. What would her late husband or partner want? Oh, good, David, that's excellent. Yeah, so maybe try to say, Dad would have wanted this, or father, your husband would have wanted that, and we need to honor his wishes. Grandma, I promised Granddad that we would take great care of you, and now's the time. Yeah. Now, by the way, you may be noticing my voice, but when I talk to people about this, I try to have a kind of a positive tone, a tone of hopefulness, and kind of an attitude like, this is going to be a good thing. My gosh, we'll have a new life adventure. I hear that they make the best food there. They have a French chef, and oh my goodness, it's unlimited ice cream all day long. How can we, this idea of you kind of sort of having that little positive emotion can be very helpful. Anybody else just have a thought about what you might say to the grandmother, or how the grandchildren can deal with this sort of San Francisco matron? Be clear with intentions. We want the same things for you, to be safe, happy, and fulfilled. Very good. Any other quick comments? Then I'll tell you what happened. Okay, hearing none, I know it's hard on this virtual format. If we were in the room together, I think people would be much more talky. So basically, I think some of you really did kind of get to the basis of this, which is they tried very hard to encourage the grandmother for her own safety and socialization. This would be a good thing. In the end, they would bring her over to the building for like a little Valentine's party, for a Christmas party, for different dinners. One of the granddaughters said, I'm thinking about volunteering here. I want you to come with me. They began to gradually introduce her to the building. Okay. They had the doctor write a letter saying, I think it's time. It's really not safe for you to be home anymore. And they basically just kind of gently kept guiding her there. And by kind of introducing her to the building here and there, they finally were able to make the move happen. It was not easy, but they got it done. And the grandmother was very unhappy for a few weeks. I think the grandchildren were worried they might be taken out of the will. But eventually, the building was clever. The building, embraced the best friends philosophy that I've written about, the Era Living writes about and practices in their communities. And they looked at her life story very carefully. And they realized that she always loved to host a party and have ladies' tea groups and volunteer for things. So they basically made the grandmother kind of a social chair. They basically encouraged her to plan the parties and plan the events and work on the menus. And they introduced her as sort of the hostess of the place. And this helped her feel valued and purposeful and wanted. And it really did help make that transition go much, much better. All right, thank you for your comments there. So again, the best friends philosophy that a number of you have heard about during these webinar series based on books I've written called The Best Friends Approach to Dementia Care. Basically, it calls for the treatment for dementia being empathy and understanding, really understanding that particularly when things go bad or go wrong, it's the disease, not the person. Knowing and using the life story. So for example, the San Francisco Society lady moving into Era Living, you better believe that they would have her life story down and have her ready to be the party planner par excellence. Develop something called the knack of caregiving. The knack is what we call the art of doing difficult things with ease or clever strategies, humor, patience, flexibility, and having your staff work with this, using good communication, learning some of the do's and don'ts of communication, talking from your heart, showing warmth in this, and of course, activity and engagement. With memory care, boredom is really the enemy. We want to keep the person active as much as possible. I'm just now looking back at some of the comments here or quick questions. Let me just go back here. Okay. Holly, does it work for the grandchildren to say, this is a burden on us? Can you make it a little easier for us? Or is that perceived as too selfish on the grandkids' part? That's a great question. I love that question. Okay, I think it all depends. I think there's some elders out there who would absolutely and absolutely do not want to be a burden on their kids or grandkids. One of the problems, though, with dementia is sometimes personality changes. When you have someone with something called frontal temporal dementia, they can actually get rather self-centered and narcissistic. So it's possible that with dementia, you're just not making good decisions. And one reason I laughed is because perhaps this matron in San Francisco has always been a bit of a diva, and she might very well say, I don't care about being a burden on you. This is all about me. You owe me. So it probably cuts lots of different ways. But certainly for lots of people, Holly, being very serious, I think I would not use the burden word, but I would say, grandmother, I have my job and I'm afraid that I might lose my job if I have to come during the day to, take care of you or work on a shift when your caregiver isn't here. So sometimes worries about finances, your security can be important. And of course, just even sharing that, hey, with all your family obligations and the young children at home, grandmother, I have to go to plan B. We have to look at another plan. I may not be able to help you as much as I want. So I think I'd still keep it positive, Holly, versus sort of laying on a bit of a guilt trip. I'd still try to say, these are the practical reasons because, grandmother, I know, I worked hard to get that law firm and I know you don't mean to get fired. So again, that might be maybe a finesse there if I explain that well. Myron, assuming the residential agency prepares nutritious meals, pardon me, what can absent family members do to assure that dementia loved one is eating well enough? Can that burden be shared with staff in the facility? Great question. Certainly there are many people with dementia who eat well. My mother-in-law is in memory care right now, and she actually wants lunch twice or dinners twice because she forgot she had the lunch or forgot she had the dinner. I guess one idea I have for you, Myron, is to really work with the building to make sure that if there are personal preferences, the building knows about them. My mother-in-law, who's Jewish, loves matzo ball soup, and that's one of her favorite things. She loves smoked salmon. She loves gefilte fish. She loves all the old kind of school Jewish foods. And so that's kind of something fun we do with her. We actually make some of her recipes. The family will make her apple strudel and bring that over for her. But you want to know, like, does grandmother, maybe grandmother or grandfather was born in New Orleans and loves Tabasco sauce and spicy food. So these are things I think could be helpful. But certainly the community will tell you if someone's not eating. They often record like what percentage of the meals are eaten. And so just talk to the family, have a care plan, ask for a care plan, and hopefully they can reassure you that the person's eating well. Now, sometimes, Myron, I will say, people with dementia begin to not eat as much. Maybe that's a swallowing issue. With later stage dementia, people begin to sometimes lose their appetites. but you certainly want to try your best to work with a dietitian to, get them some foods. They might enjoy some finger foods. They will forget how to work with their forks and knives, things like that. So finger foods could be good as well. Lots of good questions today. Thank you for those. Okay, as we begin to wind down a little bit, some tips to avoid being the bad guy. Again, give the person as much say as possible. Even simple things like offering choices like, Mom, do you want to have the salmon or the roast beef tonight? Or do you want to wear the red sweater or the pink sweater? Letting them choose. A friend of mine does her dad's checks, pays his bills, but she gets them all ready, brings them to her father with dementia, and says, Dad, I have all your accounts ready for your review. And if they're okay, sign right here. And so she has him sign the checks, however badly, and he kind of rifles through the paperwork. He doesn't really know what he's doing, but she does that because it helps him feel like he still has a say. It helps diffuse the worry that somehow she's stealing his money. And at the end of it, she says, Dad, thank you so much. What would I do without you? Again, this sort of beautiful caregiving approach. Keep your arguments and reasoning simple. Again, if I'm talking to the matron about leaving her house in San Francisco, you don't want to have a PowerPoint and have elaborate arguments. You want to just have some simple steps because, again, they're reading more of your emotion than they are your words. Pick your battles. If you are in a situation where you have a family member who's living at home, however unwisely, try not to complain about the housekeeper, or try not to complain about this or that. Kind of pick your battles, focus on really what's important, because I do hear sometimes from caregivers that their children actually are contributing to their stress by being too critical or too demanding. So, lay low with that and really focus on things. For my own family, I know when my mom had Alzheimer's, my dad was the main caregiver. We did have in-home help eventually, but their housekeeper to me was just such a waste. I don't think she even knew where the vacuum cleaner was. And I would complain about her, and my parents did not like that. They liked her, they didn't want to change her. And so I had to kind of go with the program, let go of it, and just do my own vacuuming when I came over. Again, don't argue or correct, try to be on their side. If they say President Eisenhower is doing a great job, you say, I like Ike too, don't quarrel with them. Sometimes you can blame the doctor, Mom, the doctor insists you have a bath 3 times a week. And, without this, the doctor is gonna be unhappy. The DMV, the motor vehicle department, is the one who took away the license, not you taking the car away. Things like that can be very, very helpful. Maybe you have a trusted lawyer or faith community person or somebody can be helpful. Sometimes, one son is the favored son. And if that's the case, take advantage of that and have that person kind of be involved. Develop a common script among family members regarding what's going on. If you do move someone to memory care, one of my favorite things for the family to say is, Mom, I know you're unhappy. If Mom says, I want to go home, Mom, the doctor wants you to be here for now. You need to build your strength. And this can be a good line to share a common script. Utilize trusted friends or family members to do the negotiating. Be ready to act when an inevitable emergency or crisis hits. Let's say Mom falls and breaks her ankle or has a fall or something happens, or there's a flood or a fire, hopefully nothing too serious. There's a minor car crash. That can be your time to make the move to get in-home help, make the move to assisted living. You can kind of take advantage of that kind of immediate problem to say, Mom, now's the time, the house got flooded. You need to be here and we'll work on the house while you're here. And you want to be ready to go and take advantage of those hopefully minor crises. Okay. Again, when things aren't going too well, I want to just say, try your best not to take things personally. Remember that your family member likely has fear and frustration. Dementia can cause a person to become disinhibited, say whatever comes to their mind. And when things are really going bad, remember it's the disease, not the person. It's the disease, not the person. Dementia is a call for all of us to be more patient in a busy, busy world. So again, thank you very much for being with me this afternoon. I'll get my one-pager on some toolkit ideas ready for the team to send out tomorrow. Again, for Era Living, you certainly can contact them at eraliving.com, memory care, to learn more about their program. You're always welcome to reach me at simply davidtroxel@gmail.com, davidtroxel@gmail.com, or certainly if you send something to the team at Era Living, they'll forward it to me and I'd be happy to answer your question. Thank you, Bonnie and gang, for hosting me again. And I think we have one more coming up in the next month or two as well. Thank you.
Thank you
I do
so
have time for
much,
some more
David.
questions if there are any other final questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, some great questions I heard today. I wonder if anyone has anything else they'd like to ask or put into the chat. We have just a couple minutes. All right, well, if we don't have any other questions, again, I just want to thank David so much for the presentation. It's amazing how I feel like every time I listen to something like this, I can take something new away, and we really appreciate the time that you gave us here today. We will be sending out an email, and we'll be asking for some feedback, anything that you'd like to contribute about what you heard today or anything that you'd like to hear maybe in the future. If you have any questions about Era Living or our memory care programs, or you're interested in a tour, either here at the Gardens or at Ida Culver House Broadview, please reach out. I can be reached here at 425-688-1900. And again, I'm Bonnie Kissler. We appreciate your participation, and we'll hope to see you next time. This will conclude our meeting.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks.